Japan's post-war economic miracle, the background and lessons of U.S. Japan trade friction. Background: post-war economic recovery and the miracle of economic growth. After the devastation of World War II, Japan suffered significant damage and faced dire economic challenges. However, Japan pursued rapid economic growth as part of its post-war reconstruction efforts. From the 1950s to the 1970s, Japan entered a period of rapid growth known as the High Growth Era, with expansion in industrial production and increasing exports, driving economic development. Notably, industries like automobiles, consumer electronics, and steel grew impressively, and Japanese products were highly valued for their quality and performance in global markets. This rapid growth was supported by U.S. financial assistance, such as the Reconstruction Finance Bank, during the occupation, as well as special demand created by the Korean War and technology transfers. Emergence of U.S.-Japan trade friction. From the 1960s to the 1970s, Japan pursued an export-driven economic growth strategy, leading to a surge in exports to the United States. Japanese industrial products, recognized for their high quality and low cost, gained market share in the U.S. and became increasingly competitive with American companies and industries. This led to a marked trade imbalance between Japan and the United States, with America's trade deficit with Japan growing. In particular, Japan's market share in sectors like automobiles and consumer electronics raised concerns in the U.S. about the decline of its manufacturing sector, fueling what became known as U.S. Japan trade friction. Key areas of friction and negotiations. The main areas of U.S. Japan trade friction included automobiles, semiconductors, steel, and consumer electronics. The U.S. government and industries argued that Japanese products were too competitive on price and demanded various measures to limit Japanese exports. Key events in the trade friction included automobile industry friction. By the 1980s, Japanese cars had gained a substantial share of the American market, prompting the U.S. auto industry to argue that Japanese cars were threatening domestic industry. The U.S. requested Japan to restrict its exports, and Japan agreed to voluntary export restraints on car shipments to the U.S. Semiconductor friction. The 1980s also saw trade tension in the semiconductor industry. Japan's semiconductor companies supplied high-quality, low-cost products that threatened the competitiveness of U.S. semiconductor firms. In response, the U.S. government demanded Japan open its markets and limit exports, eventually leading to the Semiconductor Agreement between the two governments, the Plaza Accord 1985. To ease U.S. Japan trade friction, the Plaza Accord was reached in 1985, aiming to devalue the dollar against the yen. This caused a significant yen appreciation, which raised the cost of Japanese goods, thereby tempering exports. However, this appreciation also became a factor, leading to Japan's later bubble economy. Japan's domestic response and transformation. The impact of U.S. Japan trade friction forced Japanese businesses and the government to take countermeasures. Japanese companies strengthened their overseas production capabilities by establishing local factories in the U.S. and Southeast Asia to diffuse friction through local production. This led to Japanese firms becoming global corporations and accelerating overseas expansion. Additionally, the Japanese government promoted domestic market opening, regulatory reforms, and a shift in industrial structure. Lessons and impacts of U.S. Japan trade friction. U.S.-Japan trade friction revealed the limits of economic growth for Japan, serving as a reminder of the importance of international economic cooperation. This experience taught Japanese companies that high-quality products alone are insufficient. Local economic contribution and cooperation are also necessary. Furthermore, it emphasized the need to diversify economic relations beyond reliance on the U.S., strengthening trade ties with Southeast Asia and other regions. Conclusion: the miracle of post-war growth and transition to a new era. Japan achieved extraordinary growth, often called an economic miracle, following the war. However, through U.S. Japan trade friction, Japan learned the importance of cooperation in the international economy. Japanese companies adapted to the global market, paving new paths for growth within the world economy. The experience of U.S.-Japan trade friction serves as a vital lesson on the limits of economic growth and the necessity of multilateral cooperation, marking a key turning point for Japan's economy into a new era.